Now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire Lord in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. I am not a fan of CGI. Now, CGI stands for computer-generated images, and this digital animation has been in Hollywood since the late 1980s, when director John Lasseter of burgeoning Pixar back in 1988 created the short digital animated film Tin Toy. And ever since that film won an Oscar back in 1988, your Hollywood has been slowly going out here and using CGI, and the way they have been using CGI basically has turned it from an effective tool that was used in early films like Terminator 2 Judgment Day to a crutch that your Hollywood now currently uses to limp films to the finish line, like many of your movies like Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Whedon cut, or many of your Marvel Cinematic Universe movies like Thor, Love, and Thunder. And your Hollywood uses your CGI as a crutch because they really know that much of their screenplays aren't very good. And to overcompensate for a weak screenplay, what Hollywood will do is go out here and throw a whole bunch of computer-generated images at the screen in the hopes of covering up all of the flaws in an incredibly weak story. And that's very irritating because if the foundation of a quality film is the screenplay, and you really can't cover up flaws in your plot line and your storyline with computer-generated images. But this is what Hollywood has been doing for the last 40 years, and it has really led to a complete decline in quality in many action films, many sci-fi films, and many fantasy films, and has sucked the life out of many films because this CGI, in many cases, just does not have any sort of heart and soul the way a stuntman would performing in many of these same movie scenes, because they could use a stuntman and get a better effect. And that was shown in movies like Mad Max Fury Road, which used a lot of stuntmen and had a lot more heart because people were actually, again, humans in the film and not just some computer-generated image that's just thrown up there to cover up a weak plot. Now, the biggest problem with CGI, as I see it, is how many of the movie studios want to use CGI as a way to replace hand-drawn animation and stop-motion films. Now, many of the Hollywood movie studios, ever since the success of Toy Story from Pixar in 1995, have been working tirelessly to replace hand-drawn animation and stop-motion as a medium, and they want to go out here and use this digital animation as a substitute for hand-drawn animation. Now, this was something that many executives at Disney and Pixar thought would be a good deal back in 1995, because back then the movie Toy Story only cost $30 million to make. But ever since CGI became the main platform for animated films, the cost of these movies has practically skyrocketed over the last 2 decades or so, and now these hand-drawn animated films are now costing just as much as a hand-drawn animated film. I mean, the budgets for films like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is at $100 million. Movies like Monsters vs. Aliens are at $175 million. Disney Pixar's Up was at $175 million. And many of these movies, again, like Turning Red and your Minions, not Minions, Lightyear, these movies are skyrocketing in price. I mean, Lightyear was $200 million, And we're seeing that these movies really aren't paying off at the box office in terms of profits. Yes, these movies do become number one at the box office, but when you consider in proportion to the cost, they're not really pulling in the money that like they used to, like they did in 1995, where your Toy Story made over $300 million on a $30 million budget. So these movies are, again, they're just costing a lot of money, but in many cases, the stories are really weak and underdeveloped. And in many cases, with a lot of these films, they just really don't have that heart like a hand-drawn animated film. I mean, when you sit there and you watch a hand-drawn animated film, in some ways, I believe it's like a person's spirit gets transferred to the page, because this is coming from a human hand and it's coming from a person, whereas much of the CGI, it just feels very detached when you see it in a lot of these films. You really don't feel that personal connection with many of the sequences in a CGI film. Many of the CGI films, when I watch them, they just feel incredibly detached when you're watching them, and you feel like there's no heart, there's no spirit, and that's possibly because the computer animation just feels so manufactured. And that's one of the problems I have with a lot of computer generated animated movies. You just really don't feel that personal connection with the story and the characters like you do with a hand-drawn animated movie. And it's really sad to see, hand-drawn animation go out the way it did back in the early 2000s, because American hand-drawn animation, I believe, was just coming into its own. I mean, during the 90s Disney Renaissance, we finally started to see Disney starting to take some serious risks, and they were starting taking steps to be on the level of your anime in Japan, because with anime they really take a lot of risks, and they really start telling more richer, more complex stories with the images that they're presenting and with the action sequences. And what I liked about the 90s with Disney's golden age wasn't just the Renaissance movies they were producing, like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Little Mermaid, which had fantastic visuals. One of my favorite projects in hand-drawn animation was Disney's Gargoyles, because Disney's Gargoyles really took storytelling to another level, and your Disney's Gargoyles really brought animation to another level because the stories were richer and more complex. The action was a lot more dynamic, and the characters were richer and more multi-dimensional, and it was really like watching a live action drama brought to life, but with hand-drawn animation. That was one of the things I loved about Disney's Gargoyles, and I always thought it was the next level for Disney, but Disney started to back off because they were making so much money on Disney princesses, and that was their main focus. And the more riskier films that they did, like Mulan and Tarzan, they really didn't get the respect that they deserved. And then they made a wrong turn, I believe, with Treasure Planet, which the story wasn't that strong. And then with Treasure Planet and Home on the Range came the end of the golden age of hand-drawn animation at Disney. And it was really sad because I believe that there was still a lot more they could do with hand-drawn animation, because I believe that the next level for Disney was, again, producing something that was a bit more R-rated or a bit more PG-13. And Disney could have taken that risk with a movie, but they didn't go out here and take it to that next level like anime did in Japan. And that's where Disney fell apart, because instead of trying to push the envelope as related to the craft of storytelling with hand-drawn animation, what Disney did was play it safe, because movies like Toy Story and these digital animated films were making money, but a lot of those computer-generated films just did not have any heart or soul. I mean, some films like The Incredibles did have that spark, but a lot of the other films, they just really felt flat and uninspired. The people in the films you never really connected with them, and the animation really did not do a good job of pulling you in. And that's one of the big problems with your computer generated films, is they don't really pull you in with art that really stimulates your emotions, because everything feels so artificial and manufactured. And the big problem with a lot of the CGI is, again, it's a crutch that Hollywood uses to carry itself to the finish line in the hopes of making some quick box office. Unfortunately, they're not seeing how their quest to go and try to get the quick box office is costing them money, because again, these films are now costing just as much as these films that are big budget blockbusters. I mean, Lightyear cost over $200 million and couldn't even put that up at the box office as its premiere. And again, that's a really sad thing, because when you consider other films that have been made using older technologies, like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which is coming to Netflix, that film was only made for $35 million, and that film uses stop motion. But what's really great about that film, from what I saw in the trailer, is how your Del Toro focuses on the craft of stop motion. And focusing on the craft of stop motion, again, you've got that human hand in there, and because you've got humans in it, you start to feel a connection to the film. Now, there are other movies that were made with smaller budgets. I mean, Bob's Burgers, which was a 2D animated movie, that movie only cost them $38 million, and that also showed that hand-drawn animation doesn't need to cost that much. I mean, this hand-drawn animation possibly had a little bit of help from some digital enhancement, but still, a hand-drawn film has a lot more heart than a lot of these CGI movies. A lot of these CGI movies, again, you just really don't feel that connection like you do. I mean, when you watch a hand-drawn animated film like Little Mermaid, you feel like it's alive. You feel the energy. I mean, it's like some of the scenes come across like a painting in some ways, and they tell a story. But many of the CGI movies, they really don't tell you a story. They just really are really flat. They really don't really bring anything to life. It's just point A to point B, and that's not really a good experience for the viewer. I mean, I've watched a lot of CGI films. I never really feel like it's a thing that really makes me feel like I'm a part of the movie. But when I watch a hand-drawn animated movie, I feel like I'm a part of the movie. I'm a part of the experience, and I believe that's partly due to the people that are involved. And because you've got a person drawing this by hand, it really, you feel their spirit transferring to the page, and that's what really brings it to life. I mean, I feel the same way about a lot of comic books, old school comic books. I mean, there's something just really special about when a guy goes out here and draws something with his hand and really puts it on a page. It feels alive. You feel something about it. But sometimes when guys use too much computer-generated stuff, you really don't feel a part of them on the page in some cases. I mean, that's the way I believe things are with this computer-generated animation. Again, it just really feels so artificial, but Hollywood holds onto it like a crutch because, again, they want guaranteed outcomes at the box office, and they fear taking risks. And because they fear taking risks, they go out here and they don't really understand that you're losing the art form. And that's the saddest part about CGI, because with CGI, everything just feels so manufactured and artificial that you're taken out of the film and taken out of the experience. That was one of the issues I had with Avengers Age of Ultron, because it was just felt so manufactured in some sequences, and it felt so busy in some sequences. I couldn't take a moment to sit back and just enjoy the film like I would with hand-drawn animation. And again, one of the things that I have an issue with computer-generated images is that people put too much stuff on screen, and you just can't pull back and relax and see what's there, because there's so much going on that it practically, just overwhelms you in some cases. That was one of the issues I had with many of the Michael Bay Transformers movies. They were just so overwhelming. And that's one of the other problems with people who use CGI. They're so insecure that they don't really trust the viewer. And because they don't trust the viewer, they put so much on screen that they just practically overwhelm you with digital backgrounds and digital, as I call it, noise, that you just cannot sit back and really enjoy what's there the same way you would with a hand-drawn animated feature. Now, with a hand-drawn animated feature, you can really just pull back and just sit there for a minute and really think about what you're watching, because with hand-drawn animation, a artist understands that he can't put, or she can't put, too much on the screen, because if she puts too much on the screen, then you're not going to be focused on the centerpiece of the story, and you're not going to be able to move it from sequence to sequence, and you're not going to be able to convey the message that you want to convey. And when it comes down to hand-drawn animation, again, it just feels so much more bolder and dynamic, and it feels has so much more energy. I mean, when you watch a hand-drawn animated film, it's one of those things that just is an amazing experience, and it's one of those things that just, when you go there, it just feels special. And that's one of the things that CGI doesn't feel like. It never feels special. It never feels really like it's something that you really want to go out here and watch all the time. I mean, yeah, in small doses, like in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, or the 2002 Spider-Man, or the 2008 Iron Man, it works. But these days, a lot of Hollywood studios, they just overuse CGI. And when they overuse CGI, it's because a lot of these Hollywood executives, again, are extremely insecure, and they are more focused on the bottom line of box office and not the art form of storytelling. And that's really hurting films, whether they be live action or animated. And many of the traditional films that were hand-drawn animated are not being appreciated the way they need to. And the medium of hand-drawn animation really isn't being appreciated the way it needs to be appreciated. I really would love to see another renaissance of hand-drawn animation, because there were so many fantastic hand-drawn animated films. I remember being in my 20s in the 90s and just enjoying that golden age of hand-drawn animation, where we got your hand-drawn animators taking things to the next level with stuff like Batman the Animated Series and the movie Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which was a great story and just showed that, Warner could take things to another level with animation. And I loved seeing all of the work that they were doing over at Sony with movies like Anastasia and all of the other movies. I mean, there was a real golden age, because we saw some fantastic animation, hand-drawn animation. We saw some really dynamic movement in a lot of those hand-drawn animated movies, and we saw some really compelling storytelling as related to a lot of that hand-drawn animation. And I've always imagined things like The Temptation of John Haynes coming to life in hand-drawn animation. And I would love to make a hand-drawn animated movie, like a Temptation of John Haynes movie like that, if I could do it, because I believe that the visuals would be so powerful. And I believe that it would be one of those kind of stories that could take hand-drawn animation to another level, because we need to see more complex stories. Because if American animators did go out here and take a lot of risk instead of trying to play it safe with CGI, we could really see American hand-drawn animation go to the level of Japanese anime and be redefined as an art form once more. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation to the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my stories on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today.